Good Shabbos again. A few weeks ago, I was speaking with a good friend, and I asked him about his 93-year-old father, a survivor of the Holocaust. He had been very sick, and I assumed his father wouldn't be dealing well with everything that's been happening. I was wrong. Rather, my friend told me that his father had been saying, "I'm more than fine. As bad as things may be right now, there's so many people out there," he said, "who are trying to help people like me. And there aren't people out there trying to hurt me because I'm Jewish." His attitude reminded me of the sheer greatness of so many of our Holocaust survivors. Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, was this past Tuesday. In Israel, it's not called Yom HaShoah. It's called Yom HaZikaron LaShoah VeLaGevurah, which officially translates to Remembrance Day for the Holocaust and heroism. We remember the victims, we honor them, and we recall the acts of valor and bravery that so many of them were able to perform. It's also called this in Israel so we can remember that so many of our Holocaust survivors are in many ways, I believe, modern-day heroes. Think for a moment about the incredible lives our precious survivors were able to build after experiencing what they did in the Shoah. There's a lot we can learn from them to help all of us get through this challenging time. Tonight, I'd like to share some of their wisdom. There's 87-year-old Naftali Perset. He writes, "I am personally not afraid, but everyone around me is afraid for me. I tell them when I was a kid, it was dangerous to be a Jewish child." I'll show you a photo from 1945 in Buchenwald, 4 days after liberation. I was in the concentration camps for 3 years. To compare that miserable situation with prisoners dying there in the conditions of the day, he said, "You're home. Do you have a blanket? Do you have anything to eat? Nobody is hitting you. Do you know that your daughter and grandchildren are healthy? So it's not bad. Stop hating each other," he said. "Stop inciting each other. We're all in the same place, and meanwhile, we are not hungry, we are not cold, and we are not facing extinction. So be optimistic, and everything will work out." There's Eliza Bunsell, an 88-year-old survivor of the Holocaust. She is widowed, but she says she's sad that she's unable to embrace her grandchildren, but still feels very fortunate compared to other Holocaust survivors who no longer have close family. She writes, "I really miss leaving the house, not seeing the family, not getting the granddaughter's hugs. But the experiences I went through as a Jewish child back in Europe, they really strengthen me today. I'm not letting myself get depressed, God forbid. I know of many Holocaust survivors who have no children or no close family who care about them or they need a hug." And she ends by saying, "I'm very optimistic that we will get out of this soon." Pinchas Golan, an 86-year-old survivor of the Shoah, he's a widower who explained how hard it is for him to be alone, but that everyone must try and remain hopeful about the situation. He writes, "The coronavirus that broke out, it depresses us Holocaust survivors as well. And of course, it depresses everyone. It's a terrible depression, loneliness. I'm lonely. There was always someone to talk to, my friends, but now during the loneliness, it's even lonelier. Everyone sits inside their home and I am alone, constantly alone within these walls. It's very hard for me. So I say a simple thing," he writes. "You have to hold on and not fall into self-pity and remain hopeful. All will be good in the end." And then there's Aryeh Nativ, age 85, a survivor of the Holocaust, who's married and says that social distancing is nothing compared to what people went through in the Holocaust. He writes, "What I miss especially is hugging and kissing the grandchildren. Among other things I went through in the Holocaust was being in a basement under the floor of a couple of Polish rescuers. And we were crowded there, 39 people under the floor for a year and a half without seeing the sunlight, without inhaling fresh air, without going outside. When I remember that situation and compare it to now during the coronavirus period, who are forced to sit at home and not travel far, there's no comparison at all. What proportion is there in this? These survivors and so many more, including my grandmother and my wife's grandparents, may they rest in peace, have often inspired me on how to get the most out of life, despite any challenges I may have faced. I don't think I'm alone in those feelings of appreciation and deep respect. This past Tuesday in Israel, of course, our precious survivors were not allowed to leave their homes or their nursing facilities. So throughout the state of Israel, we saw pictures such as this, with soldiers standing outside nursing homes, offering their attention and salute to the survivors. I think in many ways, this picture expresses our appreciation, gratitude, and pride and respect for the survivors. Because after liberation, so many Holocaust survivors faced the all-important question, why did I survive? Many of them answered this question not by a statement about the past, by what they did with their lives after liberation. Because they faced death, many learned what is most important in life. Life itself, love, family, and the community and ethical responsibility to create a better world. They reminded us all that Judaism is about life, not death, no matter how pervasive death is. Or as Holocaust educator Michael Berenbaum notes, Holocaust survivors have taught us what we must be, upstanders, confronting evil, enlarging the domain of human responsibility one for another, standing with the oppressed. Survivors themselves have become defined not by that anguish they suffered, but by the resilience they have manifested in its aftermath, not as victims, but as witnesses, speaking to our generation and to generations beyond. Tonight, my friends, as we continue through this pandemic, can we learn from our survivors? Can we allow their stories to inspire us, to remind us all, no matter our own personal circumstances, there is a way to get through this pandemic? As Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, everything can be taken from a human being but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. No discussion of the Holocaust is complete without referencing one young woman who did not survive, Anne Frank. Since the time I was a child, out of all the books and movies I've watched about the Holocaust, Anne Frank's diary is still the one that inspires me the most. Despite 2 years of having to hide in an attic, Anne Frank remained a pure beam of light. Her optimism, imagination, and grace were both contagious and astounding. She still had the hope and wisdom to see beauty and God's hand in her dire circumstances. More than ever, many of her most encouraging quotes speak to us. She wrote, "I see the world gradually being turned into wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder which will destroy us too. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will all come right, that the cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again." She also wrote in that famous of all diaries, "Where there's hope, there's life. It fills us with fresh courage and makes us strong again. Those who have courage and faith shall never perish in misery. I don't think of all the misery, but of the beauty that still remains. And as long as this exists, this sunshine in this cloudless sky, and as long as I can enjoy it, how can I be sad?" And finally, her most famous quote of all, "How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world." We still don't know how long this quarantine will last, how many more people will get sick with this dreadful virus, how many more will pass away. But here's what we do know. We can seize the best from this surreal period of time. As writer Patricia Holbrook asks, are we choosing to spend this time complaining, criticizing our authorities, and trembling in fear? Or like that wise 14-year-old Anne Frank, are we determined to find beauty, gratitude, and purpose in this trial? That is what so many of our precious survivors did after the Holocaust. Despite what they experienced afterwards throughout their lives, they still found beauty, they still found gratitude, and they still found purpose in life. Will we do the same? And now the cantor leads us in two beautiful melodies to remind us of those we lost, to remind us of the inspiration of those who survived.
It was a time of darkness when hatred filled the land. An ancient people scarred by persecution, facing the threat of the final solution. But in the midst of this madness, there were a righteous few with a kind heart and a noble soul, risking their lives to save a Jew. A soul saved is a world saved. It's a spirit of love. A life loved means a world loved. It's the light from above. We will always remember all the goodness in their hearts. The soul saved is a world saved in the spirit of love. It's the spirit of love. Ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin, be'emunah shelema, beviat HaMashiach, beviat HaMashiach, ani mamin, ve'af al pi she'yitmamea, im kol ze ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin.
We still believe that the world will be redeemed. We still believe in the coming of the Messiah.